let's see what we have to do for the day. So these many are the objectives. We are going to introduce what is MySQL as a database. We'll understand how to write a database, how to create a table. Then we'll see how we can perform the four major operations, that's like insert, update, retrieve and delete. Thereafter we will see introduction to Java database connectivity. So we'll also understand how you can perform all the CRUD operations using the JDBC APIs. We'll see some of the APIs listed here like connection statement, prepared statement and result set, which are required to perform your JDBC operations. Let's start with the introduction to MySQL. So I have installed XAMPP over here in my system, if you can see. So I have a XAMPP in my system. So XAMPP gives me this PHP MyAdmin. If you click on the PHP MyAdmin, I will be able to browse my database console. So this is MySQL in the user interface now. So you can either install XAMPP or WAMP, or you can directly install a MySQL server where you will be able to write the commands on your command prompt to perform all the DB operations, right? So the first thing is how to create a database. In order to create a database, you can see over here one column listed as database, right? So go to the databases and create a name for the database. So let's say this goes like GW2017A. So I'm going to create one database over here. So it's like GW2017A. You just say create, and the very first step is you got a database created. So nothing complicated over here, right? Go to the databases, give a name and say create. So you got a database over here, GW2017A. So database is having no tables. It says that no tables found in the database. If you can see over here, it says no tables found in the database. So we need to create the tables. Let's understand what exactly this term database is and what is meant by the term table. So database DB, as in short, is a collection of tables. Now when you talk about table, you can assume the table as in your Microsoft Excel sheet, which will have rows and columns, right? So a table will have rows and columns. What a table will have? Table is collection of rows, right? So it's a collection of rows now. Why I need table? Why I need database? What's the requirement of having a database or a table, right? What I am looking for is that when I create a class called employee and I have some attributes, let's say we got ID of the employee, we got something known as name of the employee, then I can have some other attributes. For example, age of the employee, we can have some email of the employee, etc, etc, right? So let's take one more, address. Now when you are going to create the object of the employee, so thereafter your employee can have the ID, let's say 101, employee can have the name, which goes like, let's say John, employee can have an age, let's say 20, then employee can have an email, which goes like john@example.com, and finally your employee can have an address, let's say Redwood Shores. Alright, so the data is available in the object and object is available in the RAM, to be precise in the heap data structure. Now this data is all temporary, it's volatile, RAM is volatile, right? So the moment your process is gone, your entire data is gone. What I will do, I will try to save the state of an object as a row. Now what is a database? It is available in the secondary storage, right? It's not available in the primary storage. It's available on your disk, on your drives. So it's permanently available. So I'm going to replicate this class employee as a table. Let's see how we can replicate it. So you say create table employee. Now this goes like your SQL, structured query language. If you know how to write a class, you'll be easily creating a table now. So table will contain an ID of type integer, then name which can be a varchar, let's say 256 characters. It's a variable character, it's an array of characters. So it's gonna take the space, it's gonna take that space whichever it is required. So let's say if the name is 10 characters wide, so only 10 characters will be consumed. So array char of 256 means fixed size. Varchar means dynamically we have managed it to have a memory whatever it is required. After the name I am going to say age, which is again integer type. Email again, let's say varchar maximum 256. Then you can have address over here, which can again go a varchar. Let's say this guy can be 1024. If you know how to write a class, your table is created automatically. Can you see this replication? Is it easy? This is known as structured query language, SQL. SQL is basically, I will say it's a very high level language. It's almost kind of an English, right? So you can read it and you can understand what you are trying to write. Create a table, table will have a name employee. So my class employee is representing an object in the RAM, whereas my table is going to store the values of the attributes, that means state of an object in my table, right? So I'm going to store the data in the table for my object. So the first step goes like, let's see how we can create a table. So Control C, come back. Now you select your database, it has no table. Go to this SQL engine over here if you can see, and just write your query over here. So this goes like my query. Create table employee, ID integer, name varchar, age integer, email varchar, and address again varchar, right? So I think syntatically it is clear to everyone what we have done. Now just hit the go button. So now you can see there is a table called employee, but employee is having nothing. So it says MySQL returned an empty result set, that is 0 rows. So there is nothing in this table. So if you have created one object like this over here, so at the same time you will be able to say insert into employee values. So see, it's very easy now. So whatever the values, 101, then you go John. So here you just use single quote rather than the double quotes, right? So use single quote to represent a string. Then we got age, then we got email, and lastly you got address. So here we are with the redwood shows. This is how you create a record, right? So I'm going to say Control C this statement, come back, and let's try to go to the SQL engine, and now come back and write the insert query. You got insert into employee the values, right? And let's hit the go button. It says one row inserted. You now look into your employee structure, you got the data coming into your table. So this data is available permanently, whereas the object was available temporarily. We call this beautiful concept as persistence. We are going to persist the state of an object in the database. So previously we did save the state of an object in a file using a fundamental called serialization. I hope you can recall that part. So today what we are doing is we are trying to save the state of an object in the table in the database. Now moving ahead over here, let's come back and let's create a new Java project. And let's name it like session number 17. You say next and finish. So going to create one new class over here and let the name of the class be employee and the package be com.auribises. You say finish. So what employee was having an ID, right? So employee was having one name, age, then it was having an email, and finally my employee was having an address. So see, you are focused on writing the attributes over here in your class. So other than attributes, everything is created automatically. So you do a right click and you say source generate constructors using fields. So you can select all over here. So you got one constructor. If you want, you can also have a default one. So this goes like my default one. And thereafter I'm going to have my setters and getters. So you say source generate getters and setters. And lastly I'm going to say a toString, so that whenever you create an object and when you display the reference variable, it should give you back the values. Now this structure is known as model or bean or Pojo. We have discussed this thing before even. So coming back now, I'm going to create one new class. This goes like my client with the main method, right? So I got a client class with the main method over here, and let's create an object of employee. You say employee, emp1 is a new employee. So you say emp1 dot set the name, let's say John Watson. You say emp1 dot set the ID as 101. So if your attributes, they are not private, if they are not private, so you can directly use them. If they are private, then it makes the sense of using getters and setters, right? So you can use it in both the ways. So you say set of age, emp1 dot set of email, John at example.com, and then you say emp1 dot set the address. This goes like Redwood shows. Now this is something which I was trying to tell you guys, that when you create an object of employee, right? So this object is available temporarily. You run the program, you can see the data, but the record in my object is not available anywhere, right? So you run your program, you can see that you got the output coming in, but the moment your program is finished, this record is not persisted anywhere. So in order to persist this record, I must write one SQL query which can insert the data into my table. So the first structured query language syntax which we studied was how to create a table. Then we saw how to insert the record into a table. So the way you got insert operation, similarly you have various other operations, for example delete, update and retrieve. So we'll see that very soon, but first of all we are trying to understand it in a very simple way, that we have an object, that object is temporarily available and we need to persist it, so we need a database to do so. Now the concern here is that we are using a programming language called Java, right? So I will say my application is going to be written in my language called Java, and my DB over here is supposed to be in SQL. So these are two different languages now. We got two different languages, right? Let's say one guy speaks Hindi, other guy speaks English. The guy who speaks Hindi is not at all aware of what is English, right? So you need an interface which can convert English to Hindi and Hindi to English at least, right? We need a translator who can do so, right? So we need some concept where my Java application can interact with the database. Let's see how it can be done. So I'm going to illustrate this very basic logic. Let's say I got my application. So this is my Java application. So I will say this is my Java application. So obviously if it is a Java application, it is using a language called Java. Now this Java application can typically be a very basic program, or it can be a graphical user interface, right? So I'm just trying to say this can be a program, right? A raw program, or it can also be a GUI. So a GUI where user will enter the name, phone, email, age, etc., and then hit the button submit, right? So it can be anything. This Java application, which is going to use Java as a programming language, it has to interact with a guy called database. So there is one guy called database. Now database is represented as in cylindrical shape. So when you see this cylindrical shape over here, so it is going to represent a database. So you got this particular database as MySQL. Now you got a lot of databases available in the market. So we got SQL and no SQL category. So SQL is structured query language, so which basically focuses on how to write a relational database management system. No SQL is where you don't have structured query language, but you have some key value pair kind of a mechanism, or you have graph based database, document based databases. A lot of databases are available there. But we typically are demonstrating how to write your Java application with MySQL. So your database will contain a table. Now that we have already seen how we can do it. How to create a database and how to create a table, right? So this table structure over here contains rows and columns more or less. So if you can see in MySQL, I created one database called GW2017A and we got a table known as employee. So it means over here I got this database named as GW2017A and the table is named as employee. Correct? So that is what we have seen and that is what we have written over here. Now we will say that let's divide this into different layers. The first one is referred to as front end. So it's basically the client side, and this one is back end, which will store the data. Back end is not visible to the end user, but front end is visible to the end user, right? My front end and back end, they need to communicate with each other now. We need to make them communicate now, right? So we have language Java over here, and at the other end, in the back end side, you got a language called SQL. So how they will interact now? In order to make them interact, what we will do is we'll introduce a layer over here, and this typical layer is known as Java Database Connectivity APIs, JDBC APIs. So these are APIs now. So we're gonna introduce something known as JDBC APIs. JDBC APIs are the one which will be helping our Java code to interact with the database. Now typically the databases, they will have some kind of libraries available on their side, right? So you can say this is some library. So databases will have typically libraries available at their end, and many times people say that these are nothing but they are the drivers or so, right? So it's some library or some driver. So JDBC APIs, they need to interact with the library of the database. So what happens now? You are going to send a request to this guy, to the JDBC APIs, and JDBC APIs, they're gonna interact with the library or the drivers of the database. So what we do, we try to have one more layer over here. So we got one more layer over here, and this layer over here is known as driver. So this layer over here is known as a driver. Now when you send out a request, JDBC APIs, they are going to interact with the driver. Driver will interact with the library or the driver of the database, and this is going to interact with your database. So that's like your interaction part. So it's in the both directions, right? So it's bi-directional more or less. So it's gonna be bi-directional, right? So if you want to write a Java application, your Java application will be interacting with the JDBC APIs. JDBC APIs will be interacting with some driver. So we need this driver in our program. Now you must understand, we have JDBC API is a part of java.sql package. So where these APIs are available? APIs are available java.sql package as a part of your java.sql package. So these APIs are available as java.sql. The way you got java.io, java.util, similarly you got java.sql. So I need not to worry about JDBC APIs, but this guy driver is not available in our Java. So what we need to do, we need to download this driver and we need to use this driver in my Java application program, right? So what you do for the driver? For my driver, I will download the driver and use it in my app. So you're gonna download the driver and use it in your application. That's what you need to do. And your driver is typically one jar file, where jar stands for Java archive. It's a collection of bytecodes. What is jar? .jar stands for Java archive. The way you got WAR file, right? So you got an archive of various files or a zip file. So what we have is, we have a jar file, which is a collection of bytecodes. Now, who will give you this jar file? Who's gonna give you this jar file? You're gonna download the driver and use it, which is a jar file, but who will give it? So MySQL community will give it to you. If you are going to use the database of Oracle, so Oracle will give you the driver, right? So you don't worry about it. And on the database side, who is the library, who is the driver, we don't care. So manufacturer, let's say Oracle is going to manufacture a database known as Oracle itself now, right? So that database will have a driver which we will load in our program, and this driver will further interact with the driver of the database. Let's now understand how many various drivers are available in the industry, right? So typically anyone having any query over here, what we have discussed so far. Is this image clear to everyone? Great. So in the industry we got these many drivers available. So the first driver is type 1 driver. Again you need to download the drivers, right? So this is my database, if you can see. This is your data source. Data source means database. Type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 drivers. We got 4 different types of drivers. So we are going to focus on type 4 driver. If you can see, it's the most neat and clean driver somehow, right? Even if you look onto the images, right? So type 4 is the most neat and clean driver. So I'm going to use that only. So type 1 driver, what happens over here? We got a JDBC ODBC bridge driver which interacts with the ODBC driver, and ODBC driver is going to interact with the database. ODBC stands for Open Database Connectivity. Now various operating systems earlier, right? So even now, so they have a support for open database connectivity. So what they say, what OS says, don't worry about the driver, drivers are available within me. So I got the drivers to entertain everything, right? Then in case your database is having some native library written in C++. So we need a type 2 driver where my JDBC native library will come into action. So here the databases, they are going to interact with the C++ code, right? It's a native code. Let's say you are going to come up with some n-tier architecture, client server model, right? So if you can see now, we got a 3-tier architecture where we got this type 3 driver, which is 3-tier JDBC driver. But the easiest and the most used driver is the direct driver. So your Java application will be interacting directly with the database, right? You need not to have all these mechanisms coming into the account. But for our understanding, for our better knowledge, we must know that there are 4 different types of driver: type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 driver, right? So the type 1 driver is basically an ODBC driver. Type 2 driver is known as native driver. Type 3 driver is known as 3-tier JDBC driver, and the type 4 driver is all Java JDBC driver or a direct JDBC driver, right? So you got these 4 different types of drivers. Now let us understand how this complete scenario will be achieved. how to achieve this. In order to achieve this, that my app interacts with the database. So your app now needs to make some interactions with the database, right? So this is something which we need to achieve. Database is installed on a server. Database is always installed on a server, right? So we need a server where your DB will be installed. Now your server will have some URL. Your server will have some URL. You will be able to approach your servers with some URL, www.auribises.com. You hit a server and it's gonna give you back some website, right? So typically this server is nothing but its local host. What is meant by local host now? Local host means server on my local machine itself. Good to go? So you can see this URL, it goes like local host, right? You can see it's like local host over here. Now, next thing is the user ID. We call it username and the password. So username and password are the validation part where you can work in your database. You need a database first of all that we have already installed. But in order to make my Java application interact with the database, I must have three important things. The first one is the URL, second one is the username, and third one is the password. URL where the database is installed, what exactly is your database all about, where exactly it is. Then you got username for your database and password for your database. So typically this URL over here, it goes like JDBC MySQL / localhost and a / you got the name of your database. Now I didn't write this URL, right? So it's something which is already given to us by the vendors. How do you need to write the URL? So JDBC MySQL, it's like protocol subprotocol / it's like your localhost, your machine / what is the database with which you want to interact. Username typically goes like root and password is nothing. Password is nothing, right? So this is some installation procedure. So if you give the username and the password, you need to remember that. So if my app wants to interact with the database, you must have some these kind of information which you need to do it. But there are some procedural steps. So there are some steps which we need to follow in order to come up with this database interaction. The first thing is you need to load the driver. Unless you don't have the driver, you won't be able to interact with the database, because we have already seen that interaction is gonna happen with the help of driver, right? So there are various drivers now, and typically I want a type 4 driver in my program. So the very first step is to load the driver. Now how you load the driver? You need to link the jar file in your project in Eclipse. So what I will do, I will first of all download the jar file, and thereafter I will link the jar file in the project of Eclipse, right? So this is my 1.1, this goes like your 1.2. What is the second step? The second step is you need to create a connection. To create a connection, you will be creating a connection between Java app and database. To create a connection, you need three things. We got URL, username, and password. In my step number 3, I will write SQL instruction. Now what SQL instruction I am supposed to write? Since I was supposed to perform an insert operation, so this was my SQL statement, right? So I am going to write this SQL statement, in my step number 3. In my step number 4, I will execute SQL statement over the connection. In my step number 4, I am going to execute the SQL statement over the connection, and in my step number 5, I'll just close the connection so that the resources are free. So there are just 5 steps which we need to perform so that the state of an object can be persisted in the database, and it's very easy. You need to load the driver, you need to create a connection, you need to write a SQL instruction, you execute the SQL statement over the connection, and finally you close the connection. And make sure that everything you write should be in try catch, right? So this is one important instruction, because many SQL APIs, they will throw checked exceptions. So when they will throw checked exceptions, you must try to store them, try to write them in try catch block itself. So they are going to throw checked exceptions. So are these steps clear to everyone, or anyone having any query over here? Shall we proceed and perform these steps one by one? So what we have seen that how we can write a class, how we can replicate a class as in a table in the database environment, and then finally how you have written an object, and this same object can be persisted in the table by using insert query, right? So this is my insert query. I am typically going to perform an insert operation. Now what I am going to do, I am going to perform these steps, and I will be doing with the help of object-oriented programming structure. So I am going to write an OOPS concept. I am going to create some design pattern, and this particular design pattern is known as DAO, or you can say data access objects. I am going to create one DAO. I am going to write an object-oriented programming structure to do this whole structure, right? So one typical thing can be, I'll go in the main. I go in the main and I write 5 different steps in a sequence, and it is done. The other way of doing it is that you write one separate class in which you mention these instructions so that you can use it anytime in future. So I am going to do it with the OOPS way, which is a proper design pattern, right, called DAO, and let's see how we can do it now. So first of all, you need to download the jar file. So how you will download the jar file? So if you are going to use MySQL, you just say type for driver MySQL jar file download. So Google will automatically assist you. You should be lazy. So this goes like your link from where you can download the jar file. So the first link over here itself is how you can download. So the jar file over here is known as connector J. So here you are, you can download the jar file, right? So if you can see, you got a downloadable link, and once you download the jar file, so your jar file will look like this: MySQL connector Java 5.0.8-bin.jar. Jar stands for Java archive, which is a collection of .class files, collection of bytecodes, right? So the entire juice is contained in one container called jar as of now. So now moving ahead, come back to the Eclipse. So the first step was to download the jar file. It's already there in my system. Second one is link the jar file. So dear friends, once you download, you need not to re-download, right? So make sure that, so I have just made, this has to happen only once, right? So link the jar file in your project now. So come back. So my project is session number 17. Do a right click and say build path and configure build path. Build path, configure, build path, right? So when I say configure build path, now you got this section as libraries. Click on libraries and now say add external jars. So here I have navigated to the same location, and I'm going to select this guy known as MySQL connector Java and say open, and then say apply and OK. So you got this referenced library in your Eclipse. Let's see once again how. You do a right click, you go to the build path, configure, build path, go to the libraries, say add external jars, browse your jars and then say apply and OK. Good to go. Now the type 4 driver is available in my project. So I got a type 4 driver available in my project. I got the whole library over here. So what is this type 4 driver all about? So we got this jar file, if you can see. If you try to expand the jar file, it will be giving you a feel of entire project. So it's an entire project, a lot of packages out here. And you try to open this basic package, com.mysql.jdbc. Right, so you open this and you got all the bytecodes over here. So jar file is a collection of bytecodes, right? And there is one class called driver. Now this is my type 4 driver. com.mysql.jdbc.driver. So this is my type 4 driver. I know where my driver is placed. I can see it. This is my type 4 driver. So we know the interactions, right? So interactions, how the interaction has to happen. Java app will request JDBC, JDBC will request my driver. So where is this guy driver? This guy driver is available here. Good to go? Now, let's come back and let's try to code the step number 1. Now I need to code my step number 1. Program it. In order to program, I went in my package, I created one new class and I'm going to say this is my JDBC helper. JDBC helper. It can be any name. So typically it's a DAO as in design pattern, but it can be any name of your choice. Alright, so here we are, JDBC helper. Now, write the constructor for JDBC helper. And here I'm going to put a try catch. So if any exception comes, I will say some exception plus E. Right, so guys, I got the try catch. So in my constructor, I am going to perform the first step. That's like load the driver. So my step number 1 was to load the driver. I got these two things already done, right? So step number 3 is finally load it. So how to load the driver now? So loading the driver is very easy. So you just say class dot for name. So there is a class known as class, right? And we got a method known as for name. So over here you say com.mysql.jdbc.driver. If you can see over here. So what we got com.mysql.jdbc.driver. com.mysql.jdbc.driver. I think it is clear to everyone. So the step number 1 was to load the driver and you say CISO driver loaded. I just gave a message that the driver has been loaded. Good to go, guys? Great. So step number 1, load the driver, happened in my constructor. It means that in my client area, if I say JDBC helper, helper is a new JDBC helper. So the moment you create the object of JDBC helper, what will happen? Driver is loaded, right? So here what happened? Driver is loaded. Now that's something which we have done. Driver is loaded. Alright, so let's see the next part. The next part was to create the connection. In order to create the connection, we will come back in our JDBC helper and we will declare one API called as connection. And this connection API is from java.sql package, if you can see. You say connection as in your con. It can be any name of your reference variable. So I got this connection which is created, and this connection over here is available from java.sql package. Come back and let's create one more method, public void open connection. Let's create a method called open connection. Again, let's write a try catch block. So here we are with a try catch block. how the connection will be created. You need a URL, username and password. That's how you'll be able to create the connection. So I came back, I said one URL which goes like JDBC :MySQL localhost /GW2017A. Makes a sense? Then you got a username. You say user is root and you got a password which is empty. Don't give a space, right? So empty and space makes a difference now. So if you haven't kept any username and password, so it is root and empty. Now how to create a connection? You say con assign driver manager. Now driver manager is an API from JDBC. The way you got connection as an API from JDBC, that's like your java.sql package. Driver manager is also one API from JDBC. Bani banai, right? So driver manager dot get the connection. That's it. And you pass URL, username and your password. That's it. So once you do it, thereafter I'm going to say CISO connection created, or you can say connection opened. I think there is very simple concept to write your connection instruction. Driver manager dot get connection. That's it. No complexity. You say driver manager dot get connection. It means if I go in my client, after my constructor is executed, I can say helper dot. You say helper dot open the connection. And the moment you say helper dot open connection, what will happen? Your connection will be constructed. Anyone having any queries? So this goes like my step number 2. Open the connection. Open the connection. So rain is falling chamacham outside now. So step number 3 now. Step number 3 is now to write SQL query, and along with the step number 3 I am going to combine step number 4, that is like your execute SQL query. So we're doing two things all together. To do that I am saying void insert employee. So I created my own function called insert employee. I said let's say insert employee. And now you say try catch again. For every SQL instruction, you must write a try catch. Right? So for every SQL instruction, you need to write a try catch. I mean every JDBC instruction. So how to write a SQL query? So you say string SQL goes like some SQL query, and I know what is the insert query. So insert query shall look like this. Insert into employee the values 101, John 20, then some more data. This is my exactly SQL query. So this is my step number 3. SQL query. Anyone having any doubt over here? I wrote the entire SQL query over here. Now when you have written this SQL query, in my database, this record John is already existing at 101, right? So what I can do, I can just try to come back and I will say this is 102 and this is Jenny, and let's say 22, and let's say Jenny at example.com. Let the address be same. Now, how to execute the SQL query? In order to execute the SQL query, I am going to use one more API known as statement. It is again from java.sql package. Make sure that you don't import from JDBC package of MySQL. You should always import from your java.sql package. So in case you are ending up in errors that your APIs are not working properly, so you please check your import statements, right? So they should be from java.sql package. So I'm going to give a reference variable as stmt. Now come back. You say statement assign con dot create statement. Isn't it easy? You are just calling one simple API, nothing else. Con.create statement. It means that let's create a statement. Now you say statement dot execute update SQL, and this guy will return you some number as an integer. You say statement dot execute update method will execute the SQL statement over the connection, and it's gonna return you some number, one row inserted, so this I will be 1, right? And I'm just going to say CISO I plus rows inserted. Makes sense? And now the last step, number 5, was to close the connection, right? So I'm going to create one method known as close connection. Again, you write your try catch, and here in my try catch I will just say con dot close. I. So you will write con dot close over here. So it means what? In my client part, I will come back and I will say helper dot insert employee and helper dot close the. Now can you see how beautiful your client class is looking? So we created one design pattern out here with the help of JDBC helper API. So you are just calling 4 statements and it is done. And anytime you need to insert an employee, you do the same story every time. Correct? As of now, this 102 and let's say Jenny at example.com. So the data is available in the object. Why not to say insert employee emp1, which makes some more relevant sense. You say insert employee and then you pass emp1. What is emp1? Emp1 is a reference variable which is pointing to the object, and object is containing data, and this is the required data to be inserted into the table. So I pass this guy emp1, and in my JDBC helper I will say insert employee, you take one emp as a reference variable. So pass by reference happened. Now insert into employee the values 102, select it, delete it, concatenate the string by saying employee dot get the. Makes sense or not? I concatenated the data. Insert into employee values. What value? Employee dot get the ID. Now you need to insert Jenny. Again concatenate and say employee dot get the name. For age, employee dot get of age. Then you say employee dot get of email, and lastly your redwood shores, you say your employee dot get of address. I think this is a more relevant statement. Now what will happen? Dynamically the fundamental is written in such a way that client class will be able to insert some employee, right? So it is available in the emp1. So you can have one more employee now. So let's try to create one more employee. This guy is employee 2. Let's say 103, comma, Ben, let's say 30, Ben at example.com, let's say some Southern Shores. So I will say insert the employee emp1, insert the employee emp2. Now this is the benefit of oops. Keep on calling the method with the help of JDBC object and insert as many as employees you want. Let's now try to run the code and see what will happen, right? So what we did, we created an employee class which was just a POJO, and we created couple of objects in the client. Either you create the object by default constructor and you set the values later, or you just give the values in the constructor. That's your own preference. Then let's not do a CISO over here. You created the JDBC helper object. Once you created the JDBC helper object, your constructor will be executed and driver will be loaded. Then you got the open connection method. So you say your helper dot open connection. The moment you say open connection, so this connection will be created and opened by your JDBC. Then you say insert employee. Insert employee is my method which is going to insert the data into the table. So here I said insert into employee with the values, and I got substitution of the data from the employee object, right? So here we have substituted the data. And this is concatenation of string, that's it. Overall it's a SQL query. And finally you say con dot create statement and execute the SQL statement, right? So these many rows inserted, and in case of any exception it will throw, and finally you say close off connection to release the memory resources. Now in my database I just have only one single record 101 John and the data. Let's try to run our client class. Come to the client, hit the run button. It says driver loaded, connection opened, one row inserted again because we inserted two objects. So I think I forgot to put one CISO statement over here. So we can just put one CISO statement which will go like your connection closed, right? So it makes a sense. Connection closed. So let's come back. Now let's come back in our database and refresh the table structure, and you can see the data in the table. So you were having the data in the object temporarily, and now if you close the Eclipse, if you close the SQL engine, you again open it back, you go to your database sometimes and see your employee table, record will be available. So it's a permanent persistence, and we got the first operation as how you can perform an insert into your table. Anyone having any queries, guys? What we did? So very effectively I have created this JDBC helper which is quite easy to understand. It is broken into modules. You call the methods using your object-oriented programming structure, and you can anytime do your insert employee. Now we will be looking on to how to perform the next operations, that's like your retrieve, update and delete. But before we proceed with that, I would like to simplify this concatenation operation. If you see, this concatenation operation can go really wild when the fields are huge. Let's say there are 27 columns in my table. It will be very much a mess to concatenate 27 columns, right? So what I can do? I will not use statement. I will use one more API called prepared statement. You say PSTMT. It can be any name. I got one more API called prepared statement. Let's see how to use it. So you say string. Let's comment out this whole structure over here. You say string SQL goes like insert into employee the values. So how many values were there? So total of we got 5 attributes, I think, right? So 1 2 3 4 5. So what you will do, you will say insert into employees the values question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark and a question mark. Total 5 question marks. We got 5 wildcard characters over here. We got 5 question marks. Thereafter you don't say statement, but you say prepared statement assign con dot prepare statement. Now see the difference. You said create statement, here you are saying prepare statement. Here you are not passing SQL, but here you are passing SQL. So that's the difference. No SQL over here, but SQL over here. After this you say PSTMT dot set the integer on the first guy as employee dot get of ID. Then you say the second one was your string. You say employee dot get the name. So what we are doing, we are substituting, we are replacing the question marks now. So the first question mark will be replaced by the age, by the ID, second by the name. Your third question mark will be replaced by your age, and then your fourth and fifth, they are going to get replaced with the email and finally with the address. Now this looks more neat and clean as compared to the previous one. You got a prepared statement API which can help us to write the code effectively, and thereafter what you can do, you can say the same story. You say pstmt dot execute update. Now in the statement you got SQL query mentioned in the execute update method, but in case of prepared statement you don't mention the SQL part, right? And in the end you got the same story. Come back to the client. Let us try to insert the employee 2 with the ID as 104, Fiona, let's say 33, and let's run the code once again. Now you see some exception, or let's see, 1, 2 and 3, right? So come back, rerun the code, and here you are, driver loaded, connection opened, rows inserted, connection closed. Come back and let's see if Fiona is there or not. So 104, you got Fiona in the list. So this goes like my JDBC insert operation. We are left with 3 more operations which are very simple now, right? So once you are done with this, so other operations are really simple. So one retrieve operation is a bit different. So that will be all as of now for the insert operation. Anyone having any query, guys? Any query to anyone? Till here.
So create statement.
Create statement.
So
which create statement?
So एक simple statement है वो
which one? This? Create statement.
So statement the key.
All right. So when you say statement assign con.create statement is a method of connection class. Connection over here, right? So not connection, more or less class. So let's understand. So when you see connection is an interface. Statement, again interface. Prepared statement, again interface. So when you create a connection, how you create a connection? You say driver manager dot get connection. Yani ki here what is happening? Some polymorphism is happening in the background. When you say driver manager dot get connection, some polymorphic statement. If you can recall your plan 2G, 4G example. Now your con is initialized, so you are calling the create statement method so that you can get a reference to the statement object, and then you are executing the SQL statement. Same thing happens in your prepared statement case. So these are the APIs which we are calling so that our reference variables can be initialized, right? Any other queries, guys? All good to go? Right, so thank you guys.